Ni hao. So, this morning, I'd like to talk to you about opportunities and challenges for all of us in the automotive market in China. The importance of China and India in the world automotive market is well documented, as is the importance of economic growth. If we just look at the BRIC countries, particularly India and China, they together will account for 23% of global gross domestic product by 2017. And the landscape for growth in spending by the middle class is shifting dramatically around the world. In 2009, China was only 4%. We expect it to be 18% over the next 20 years or so, and between India and China, about 40% of total spending. They are also projecting that China and India together will be greater than 50% of middle class spending over the next 40 years. So what about the China automotive market? Car ownership actually remains relatively cost prohibitive for much of the population of China. In the USA, a car is less than an average one-year income. In China, much greater. Gasoline, which is almost prohibitive in India, is still a very expensive part of owning a car in China, ranging up to something like a third of daily income. But passenger car penetration, while it is declining in the United States, is growing very rapidly in China, now at about 5.8%. The compound annual growth of the market for automotive production is the fastest in the world in China, well ahead of any other country in the world. And the Chinese market is very dynamic and very diverse. Every type of vehicle is required, and the markets are growing for all of these. The vehicle mix in China is very different from other parts of the world, being a mixture of two-wheel vehicles, passenger cars, and commercial vehicles, making up the total. Per capita vehicle use in China is increasing both rapidly and very consistently, a steady and very rapid growth rate. Chinese OEMs account for over 55% of automotive production in China. And China has a very highly skilled workforce. If you look at survey data of CEOs around the world and ask them, by country, which objective do you hope to achieve in the next 12 months? Among the top responses from almost all CEOs is to grow their customer base in China, to access the local talent base, to build R&D and innovation capability in China, and to build manufacturing capacity. China is by virtually all surveys, the most attractive place for foreign investment today. This data is from A.T. Kearney. They survey countries all over the world and choose China number one. The R&D, research and development, being performed by majority-owned affiliates of U.S. parent companies is growing fastest in China, at a 41% growth rate in the amount of R&D that is executed in China. And China leads the world in the production of science and engineering graduates, well ahead of other major countries. This, all science and engineering degrees, and secondly, engineering degrees alone. The education level is very competitive, both in quality and in distribution of degree capabilities with other countries in the world and other regions, North America and Europe, and approximately the same in India. But both China and India have another big advantage that does not exist in the United States and Europe. That is that the workforce is very young, substantially younger than other parts of the world, less experience, and less cost. And with time, as that experience grows, so will the cost, but so will the quality and capability of the educated workforce. And in China, we have a higher percentage of engineers working in the automotive industry than we do, for example, in North America, modestly larger than in Japan, in Japan, and a little less than in India, but still a significant available resource for engineering. So what about global challenges in the automotive industry? Alan Mulally, the CEO of Ford Motor Company, joined the company from Boeing, and his first reaction to the automobile industry was shock at the degree of complexity. Here was a man used to managing a company that built complex aircraft, and yet configuration management for the automotive industry was far greater than what was experienced in aerospace. In fact, automobiles have become among the most complex portable computer platforms. There are really two unique aspects to automobiles. One, this configuration complexity means that electronically there are millions and millions of configurations required to support automotive production. The existence of options means that few automobiles have identical wire harnesses. And secondly, the automotive industry today has adopted the most advanced of electronic networking, computing, embedded systems, and is rapidly growing in complexity the amount of embedded software and the complexity of sensors, so that the idea that humans could design the electrical wire harness is rapidly becoming an impossibility as the complexity grows. In addition, an automobile is really a very complex, multi-domain ecosystem. We need to get data from service and diagnostics to feed back into the product definition process, into marketing and product plans, we need to have architectural data easily available as we generate the design of the vehicle, and we need to have interaction between electrical data, mechanical data, other system data, and the most advanced of embedded software and embedded software debug tools. Embedded software is becoming an enormous problem for the automotive industry as it is for other systems companies. And so the same techniques used in the most advanced computer systems now have to be adopted and supported in the automotive market. The lines of code that must be supported is rapidly growing, and within the next few years, it will be quite common to have 300 million lines of code in an automobile in production in a commercial market. So, how is design affected? We've all seen the V diagram. We all work with how we define the requirements for a vehicle and then decompose those requirements, add detail, and decide upon the features and functions, generate a logical design, a platform, ultimately the physical implementation, and the component designs, and each of the suppliers, of course, has a similar process, which is followed by a validation and verification. A validation to see that we have designed what we have intended, and verification to see that we've designed it properly so that it will work without problems. So for most companies, most OEMs, the V becomes the driver of time to market, as well as reliability, maintainability, safety, conformance with regulatory requirements. So each supplier in the supply chain needs to compress the amount of time it takes to do an iteration of design if the OEM hopes to do the same. Compressing that V is the single biggest thing that will allow us to accelerate the development of vehicles, but much more importantly, to evaluate alternatives, to be able to try to find an optimum design using less time, and of course, get to market sooner than our competition and grow our market share. There are really three things that impact the squeezing of this V for improvement of the process. The first is creating data flow. Data flow down the V so that data is never re-entered, it is just reused. Providing that digital continuity so data is available to all the organizations that participate in design, from the divisions of the OEM to the companies in the supply chain. And the ability to use that data to simulate at higher levels of abstraction so that we can create correct by construction designs. And that is, in fact, the second and most promising area of design today, the ability to automatically synthesize the design of a vehicle, especially from its electrical system. Through design automation, we can assure that a synthesized design that turns a logical design into a physical design is, in fact, provably correct and accurate, and that we are not introducing errors in the translation of information. And lastly, manufacturing aware flows, the ability to design with constraints so that when the car goes to manufacturing and service, we follow a set of rules and we verify them so that it will in fact be manufacturable without problems and will be brought up quickly. And with this, we can hope to have a major impact on all aspects of schedule, quality, and capability. So a part of this is information management. The ability to tie together the enterprise, the corporation, the entire supply chain into a set of simultaneously updated and current information. To do that in modern companies that we deal with every day, some type of adoption of the standards associated with service-oriented architectures has been applied, so that the entire entity can access information elsewhere, update it in real time, and have available what's needed for an optimum design. So let me talk about a few trends that I think are most important in what's changing design today. First, constraint-driven design. We've always designed with constraints. The difference now is the process can be automated. This is a screenshot of design software that vendors' customers use in designing electronic products. For decades, we've been able to design printed circuit boards and integrated circuits with very complex constraints. Today, the same can be done in developing a wire harness or a full electrical system for a vehicle. The constraints may be practices within a particular company. Maybe you found that you should have no more than 5 wires in a bundle in a wet zone of a car, and that becomes a design rule or practice that you found to be necessary. Or it can be constraints that are set by regulations or by other changes in the manufacturing process. All of it is becoming more complex, and to ask a human being to create a design that obeys all of these constraints is virtually impossible. And so it has effects everywhere in the design. The selection of components, for example, is driven by constraints. What type of connector? What is your corporation's experience with reliability of certain suppliers? What are other physical constraints that are required? By having a modern wiring environment, a complete electrical system design environment, it becomes possible to automatically check these constraints, but more importantly, to iterate, to produce a major trend that is sweeping the automotive world today is generative design. No more is the wiring of a vehicle drawing-based in leading companies. It's data-based. It means that once you give a set of constraints and a set of connection points, you should be able to automatically generate wiring configurations that conform to the constraints you require. The best part of this is that many alternatives can be tested in a short period of time. So generative wiring includes information that includes the intellectual property of the design and other information you want to include. It knows the topology of the car. How large is the hole in the frame through which the wire bundle is fit? The logical connectivity. What has to be connected? The products later. How will you decide upon options? Maybe you only put seat heaters in cars with a long wheelbase. Maybe you have other constraints, all of which should be part of the constraints for the generative wiring system. And then, of course, all the device interfaces that have to be matched up. With that, wiring is routinely generated automatically today at leading companies and optimized through iteration. A third phenomenon, one that is also sweeping the world, and one where China has a unique opportunity because you have less legacy practices to get rid of and a better opportunity to advance to the most advanced approaches to design. That is AUTOSAR, a standard which over the last 15 years has evolved and now is increasingly becoming a methodology for design of automobiles. So in a typical design in the past, every electronic control unit is a complex combination of embedded software, mechanical design, frequently operating systems, firmware, and all of this creates difficulty to change, complexity of design, and other problems. AUTOSAR first makes the specification machine readable. So instead of written specifications, we have unambiguous descriptions of what the design should do. With AUTOSAR, there are two standard interfaces. The real-time environment to which every software component must comply, and then the microcontroller or microcomputer abstraction layer to which all the ECUs must conform. Now with this, we are able to generate designs in different parts of an organization, and the software does the integration. The basic AUTOSAR firmware serves as the interface between the software and the ECUs, and Number Graphics became the first company to support both AUTOSAR 3.0 and then 4.0, 4.2 worldwide, and today we are inundated with companies that want to move faster in the adoption of AUTOSAR. So, in an AUTOSAR system, because there are fixed interfaces, software components can be retargeted to available compute resources in the car without disrupting the verification that has already been done. Similarly, ECUs can be altered, changed, corrected, and still comply with the microcontroller abstraction layer, and so support and verification of the design becomes much easier, and it greatly accelerates the design process. Today, there are something in excess of this year 130 different platforms being designed with AUTOSAR, and we expect that to grow another 50 to 70% next year, rapidly becoming the standard for automotive design. Another major trend that's important to all of us is GENIVI, in-vehicle infotainment. Formed in 2009, GENIVI now has over 170 automotive OEMs that participate in this infotainment standard. Automotive infotainment is becoming more complex just as all consumer electronics is increasing in complexity. The GENIVI Alliance is based upon open source Linux, the most advanced of existing operating systems. Of course, Mentor is a member of the board of GENIVI and has worked actively with them, and is the leading provider of open source software development tools. But it's much more than simply the operating system. It means design tools tied to specific processors. It means a complete environment for support of systems on a chip. The embedded Linux, GENIVI, and Android support, as well as the ability to provide human interface to the application and the tools to automatically generate that interface. For GENIVI, about 80% of the GENIVI Linux platform comes from existing open source software donated for free and available to users. Another 15% came from users taking existing software and donating it to the open source community, and then about 5% is automotive specific code. In most cases, this is not a highly differentiated part of the vehicle design, and so the benefits of open source are rapid market access. Mentor Graphics provides a development environment for GENIVI-based applications, as well as other open source applications, called Sorcery Code Bench. 20,000 copies of Sorcery Code Bench are downloaded every month for developers of open source software. It supports verification of runtime, middleware, hardware probes to verify the design, as well as support for production products and advanced operating systems like Android or Unix. Another trend that I hear about at every one of these meetings I go to, and I go to a lot of these events around the world, is ISO 26262. This is not a law, it's not a regulation, and yet everyone is interested in compliance with 26262. Why? Well, because it is a precursor to what will be required for safety in vehicles in the future, but more importantly, it's a set of guidelines which, even if it never became law, would be important in design practices to assure that independent systems are independently testable, that they don't interfere with one another, that design practices are such that safety can be designed in and the risk of failure can be minimized. Fortunately, AUTOSAR and ISO 262 are intimately connected. The same practices that evolved with AUTOSAR have been embedded in the foundation of ISO 262. So Inventor's AUTOSAR implementation, our V-Star product, was developed in parallel with our requirements for ISO 262. The work products required by 26262 are automatically generated. It's developed with the Automotive STICE 3-level standard process. And the kinds of features required for safety are part of the development process, like memory protection and so forth. And other tools for AUTOSAR development, like the VSX family of tools for analysis and validation, also conform and provide reports that evaluate the ISO 262 implementation capability and assure that design practices are best in class for both safety as well as for AUTOSAR. Another area, cross-domain system modeling. So while much of our attention has gone to how do you conceive, develop, support, maintain, and service the electrical wiring of a vehicle, the subsystems in a vehicle need to be designed and verified as well, and many of them involve multiple disciplines, multiple types of physical phenomena. System modeling in multi-physics is becoming a new type of simulation that leaders in the electronic design and automation industry are now supporting. So it's quite possible to take existing models or create new models from the mechanical domain, the electrical domain, control circuitry, software, optoelectronics, and create a system-level simulation to verify those designs. We have dozens of system examples that people have been able to dramatically reduce the time and cost of design through multi-physics simulation. This is an example from the aerospace industry, where they were replacing hydraulic brakes with electric brakes. The problem is very, very expensive to run tests, about $700,000 per test. And yet, through multi-physics simulation, they can run thousands of tests. They can change variables. They can optimize, and in fact, take the finite element analysis data, incorporate it in differential equations that describe system operation, and verify that the performance is what they intended for the braking system. Now, just because you use one supplier's tool for designing the electrical wiring in a vehicle doesn't mean that you don't need to put together other specialized tools. At some of our events, we've had partners, like MathWorks, for example, do joint demonstrations of Simulink operating with our multi-physics simulator, System Vision, and creating a full system verification environment from first principles of algorithms through execution of the physical implementation, working together, being compatible with AUTOSAR, and in many cases, using UML or MATLAB, whichever is most appropriate, for description of the high-level physics. Finally, linking data across the enterprise is a key enabler for all of this to work. So, traditionally, the PLMs for organizations have tried to tie all the data together, all the data formats, all in one database. And while this has worked for many years, as designs become more complex, it will become less and less feasible. The early standards were based upon mainframe computers where a central database communicated with the individual parts of the organization doing the electrical design, the functional design, mechanical design, and data formats were translated and typically stored in the central database. While this works, it becomes increasingly difficult as these become more and more sophisticated. Another very popular approach today that, of course, Mentor interfaces with, as we do all PLMs, is one that ties together everything in a single PDM system and forces each discipline to use all the same data formats in a single database. And this, while it works for relatively simple design, also will become increasingly dysfunctional with time. Where the world is going is collaboration and federation, with services-oriented architectures tying together the various types of design that need to go into a system, and with the PDM as a peer working in a collaboration environment. Ultimately, federation wins because it offers the highest performance. Electrical designers get to use tools optimized for electrical design and get access to the information they need from the mechanical design and other design systems in the vehicle. Everyone gets to interact with an interface that provides the maximum ease of use, and the whole system can be updated without updating and re-verifying the entire enterprise, but simply updating portions of the design environment. And so, over time, we expect more and more companies will give the electrical designer the access to just the information needed. Is the hole in the frame big enough for the wire bundle, rather than dumping all of the mechanical data on the electrical designer and forcing him to accept the degradation in performance and complexity. So to summarize, there's a tremendous opportunity here in China for all of us. It's why Mentor Graphics is spending so much of our time here and dedicating so many resources to help the automotive OEMs that are servicing the China market and the export market. It's rapidly growing. It's the #1 market in the world. And there's a very well-trained and capable workforce of engineers and technicians to support a rapidly growing automotive industry. The complexity is both a major challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity because existing automotive manufacturers around the world have to do away with their existing systems and develop new ones. And in many cases, here in China, we see much more rapid adoption of new technology. But the companies that do aggressively adopt the leading edge technologies and the standards will have a clear competitive advantage, and they will be the leaders of the future. And it's our wish at Mentor Graphics that we can work with you to become those leaders, to satisfy those needs, to help your customers, and to grow your companies and your country as we move into the future of automotive electronics. Thank you.